Olivia Chambers stepped into the shooting range at Hawthorne Training Academy with a worn leather toolkit slung over her shoulder. Her faded jeans had patches on the knees, her navy blue sweater was simple and unbranded, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun. At 34, she looked nothing like the sleek professional shooters who dominated the facility in their logo-emblazoned tactical gear. She hadn't touched a competition-grade rifle in 5 years, not since the day she'd packed her medals away and left the cores behind. Today she was here as a guest, accompanying her brother Alex Chambers, a rising star in competitive shooting who wanted to show her the top civilian training facility in the country. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Hawthorne wasn't just any shooting range. It was the premier training ground where celebrities, wealthy enthusiasts, and social media influencers came to perfect their marksmanship for sponsorships and online content. Every detail screamed exclusivity and status: climate-controlled firing lanes, digital targeting systems worth more than luxury cars, custom-fitted shooting stations with personalized leather chairs, and a members-only lounge that rivaled 5-star hotels. The regular members wore gear that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Their rifles gleamed with custom engravings, their scopes were top-of-the-line imports, and their attitudes matched their platinum memberships. This was where influencer deals were signed, where shooting celebrities were made, and where status in the competitive shooting world was established. Olivia carried only her old leather kit containing basic cleaning supplies, a few tools, and a notebook. She walked with quiet assurance, her eyes unconsciously assessing the range, noting sight lines, wind indicators, and shooting positions. Old habits die hard. The stares began immediately. A bearded man in a shooting vest, covered with sponsor patches, looked up from his custom rifle and smirked. "Lost your way to the spectator section," he said loudly enough for his friends to hear. A woman in matching branded gear whispered to her group, "She's not even carrying a case. What's she doing on the competition floor?" The looks weren't curious, they were dismissive, calculated, cold. To them, Olivia was an intrusion, unsponsored, unworthy, insignificant. They had no idea that the woman they saw as an outsider was about to become the most important name any of them would remember. Olivia didn't speak or explain herself. She simply stood on the polished concrete floor, quiet and composed, watching. And the range kept watching her back, judging her, measuring her, and eventually underestimating her. The mockery begins as the morning light streams through the range's massive windows. Olivia positions herself near the equipment station, her worn boots planted firmly on the gleaming floor. She remains still, observing the choreographed precision of elite training unfolding before her. At the center lane, Victoria Reeves commands attention effortlessly. Her platinum blonde hair is pulled into a perfect ponytail, and her custom shooting jacket bears the logos of 5 major sponsors. She is everything Hawthorne represents: connected, confident, and completely convinced of her own superiority. Victoria hadn't glanced at Olivia initially, but when she notices her, a smirk forms immediately. Victoria turns to her cluster of admirers, her voice carrying deliberately across the range. "Did someone misplace their janitor? This is a professional shooting range, not a maintenance closet." The laughter is immediate and cruel. A shooter, wearing a hat with his social media handle embroidered on it, chimes in. Maybe she's doing research for a budget blog. Hope she takes notes on what real equipment looks like. Olivia's expression never changes. She'd stood through worse than civilian mockery during her tours overseas, but something cold settles in her chest as Victoria approaches, her expensive boots clicking on the polished concrete. "You lost, honey." Victoria's tone sharpens. "This isn't a public range. You need credentials to stand here." Olivia's gaze remains steady, unflinching. Victoria's eyes travel down to the leather toolkit. No brand names, no flashy designs, just worn leather and honest use. That's adorable. Victoria steps closer, her voice dropping to mock intimacy. Let me guess, tagging along with someone important, trying to feel included? A few instructors nearby exchange glances but say nothing. One even chuckles quietly, emboldening Victoria further. Without hesitation, Victoria picks up a cleaning rod from a nearby table and casually drops it at Olivia's feet. Since you look like the help, maybe make yourself useful and clean up around here. The range erupts in laughter. Someone claps, another whistles. A shooter taps the expensive scope on his rifle and calls out, "Hey, maintenance lady, I've got a smudge on my lens. Want to earn a tip?" Olivia doesn't even flinch. Her silence isn't weakness, it's unsettling. It absorbs their mockery like a sponge, giving nothing back, revealing nothing. But behind those calm eyes, Olivia is cataloging everything. Hierarchy, the arrogance, the complete lack of discipline disguised as elite marksmanship. She'd seen real shooters, real combat, real expertise. This wasn't it. Her silence only fuels their boldness. What started as casual mockery evolves into something crueler, more targeted. A tall man approaches with his phone raised, filming. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Tell us your name," he says mockingly. "We want to remember who got escorted out today." Victoria nods toward the front desk. "Let's speed this up. Someone should call security. Isn't this a violation of membership rules?" Across the range, a uniformed staff member begins walking over. His name tag reads Hoffman, and his polo shirt bears the Hawthorne logo embroidered in gold thread. He doesn't ask questions or investigate. He simply points. "This section is for registered members and authorized guests only," he announces firmly. "Please return to the observation area." Olivia looks at him for just a second, then nods. She turns slowly and begins walking away, her worn boots making no sound on the gleaming floor. The range buzzes with triumph. She actually left, someone whispers. Another shooter snorts. I guess even tourists know when they're not wanted. But then Martin Reynolds appears, a man whose presence commands instant respect. At 58, he's the director of Hawthorne Academy, a former Olympic shooting coach, and the author of 3 definitive books on marksmanship. His voice cuts through, the laughter like a blade. "Ma'am," his voice silences the room, "this facility operates under strict membership protocols. Your name is not on today's guest registry." Olivia turns to face him, meeting his gaze with that same unshakable calm. She doesn't defend herself or look surprised. She simply stands there, her worn boots solid against the polished concrete floor. Victoria steps forward, practically glowing with vindication. She's been loitering around the equipment, touching things she shouldn't. "That's a violation of range safety, right, Director?" Several shooters have their phones out now, capturing what they see as victory. One whispers, "This is gold," posting this with #range cleaned. Reynolds' expression remains neutral, but his tone turns sharper. "You need to leave the competition floor immediately." Olivia doesn't flinch. She adjusts her leather kit strap and says quietly, "I understand." Victoria gives a theatrical wave. "Exits that way, sweetheart. Thanks for visiting Hawthorne. Please don't come back." The laughter spreads like wildfire, mock applause, sarcastic salutes, slow clapping as Olivia begins her walk to the door. But something has shifted. A few shooters lower their phones mid-recording, their brows furrowed. The mood isn't entirely triumphant anymore. There's something unsettling about Olivia's composure, her complete lack of defensive behavior. Who walks away that calmly from public humiliation? Who absorbs that much mockery without a single word of protest? As Olivia disappears through the glass doors, A strange quiet settles over parts of the range, not enough to stop the celebration, but enough to plant seeds of doubt. They should have paid attention to that doubt. When chaos strikes, it happens. Without warning. Just after lunch, the automated system announces an unexpected challenge event. Attention all members. Special Precision Challenge now live. Qualifying scores will be submitted for national rankings. All participants have 20 minutes to register and prepare. Victoria Reeves takes charge immediately, gathering her entourage around her. This is perfect timing. I've been working on my long-distance groupings all week. Shooters scramble to their lockers, retrieving their most precise rifles, checking scopes, preparing shooting stations. The digital scoreboard flashes to life, displaying the day's challenge: extreme distance precision shooting with environmental variables. Victoria is assigned as the first shooter, her confidence radiating as she steps up to the firing line. "Watch and learn, everyone," she announces, settling into her custom shooting position. But within minutes, everything starts falling apart. The wind calculation system introduces unexpected variables. Digital targets shift positions at random intervals. Everything Victoria had been taught about influence and status had crumbled in a single afternoon. As the sun sets over Hawthorne Academy, Olivia walks toward the parking lot where her brother Alex is waiting by their modest sedan, her worn boots. Scuff the pavement, her leather kit shifts against her side. Behind her, she can feel eyes watching, not with mockery this time, but with something approaching understanding. Some of them are finally beginning to learn what she'd known all along. You don't need flashy gear to be respected. You just need to earn it. 3 weeks later, Olivia Chambers returns to Hawthorne Academy. This time, she wears a simple polo shirt with the Marine Corps' emblem embroidered discreetly on the chest. Still understated, still practical, but carrying herself with the quiet authority that had always been there. The transformation in the facility is remarkable. Word of the incident has spread through shooting circles like wildfire. Suddenly, Hawthorne's reputation for producing social media marksmen has become a liability rather than a selling point. New protocols are in place. Merit-based evaluation has replaced the old system of connections and expensive equipment. Several members have had their privileges revoked, others are on probation, and the entire culture is shifting. Olivia's first class is small 15 shooters who have specifically requested to learn from her. Jasmine Torres is there, along with others who have shown genuine interest in becoming real marksmen rather than shooting influencers. Precision, she begins, standing in front of a simple whiteboard in a basic classroom, isn't about the most expensive scope or the flashiest rifle. It's not about how many followers you have or how good you look holding a weapon. She writes 3 words on the board: discipline, focus, humility. Real marksmen master themselves before they try to master their targets. They understand that respect is earned through consistent performance and character, not demanded through status or expensive gear. Jasmine raises her hand. "Ma'am, how do you stay so calm under pressure?" Olivia smiles slightly. "I've learned that ego is the enemy of accuracy. When you know who you are and what you're capable of, other people's opinions become background noise." After the class, Director Reynolds finds her in the hallway. "Early reports are promising," he says. "The members who are staying seem different, more focused, more serious about the craft." "Good," Olivia replies. "They're learning that being a marksman isn't about looking the part. It's about hitting the target when it matters most." As she walks across the facility toward her car, Olivia notices the changes everywhere: shooters working together, regardless of their backgrounds. Instructors focusing on technique development rather than social connections. The expensive equipment is still there, but it no longer seems to matter as much. Near the entrance, she passes a group of new members going through basic orientation. They look nervous, excited, unsure of themselves, the way new shooters should look before they learn what they're truly capable of. One of them, a young woman about the same age Olivia had been when she first enlisted, catches her eye. There's something familiar in her expression, a hunger to prove herself, to master something difficult, to be judged on merit rather than appearance. Olivia nods to her as she passes. The young woman straightens unconsciously, sensing something significant in that simple gesture of acknowledgement. Getting into her car, Olivia reflects on how strange life can be. She'd come to Hawthorne as an observer, ended up as a teacher, and somehow found a new purpose in the process. Her phone buzzes with a text from her sister. "Proud of you. You're changing lives over there." She types back, "Just teaching them what you taught me years ago." That real expertise doesn't need to announce itself. As she drives away from Hawthorne Academy for the day, Olivia Chambers, former Master Gunnery Sergeant, current instructor, and forever Marine, smiles quietly to herself. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be yourself, stand your ground, and let your actions speak louder than anyone else's words. The young woman at the entrance is still watching her car disappear down the road, something stirring in her chest that feels like possibility, like potential, like the beginning of understanding what it really means to master a skill with honor and dignity. And Olivia knows that the real victory isn't in the humiliation of those who had mocked her. It's in the inspiration of those who will carry forward the lessons of true marksmanship, true service, and true strength. The story was over, but the teaching had just begun. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our everyday inspiration community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. 6 months after taking the technical advisor position at Hawthorne Academy, Olivia Chambers had transformed the facility's approach to marksmanship training. Gone were the days of Instagram poses and designer tactical gear. Instead, the range now emphasized fundamentals, mental discipline, and adaptability to changing conditions. On this particular morning, Olivia arrived earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, with just a hint of purple on the horizon. She preferred these quiet moments before the facility filled with shooters. It gave her time to prepare, to center herself, and to remember why she had agreed to this position in the first place. As she unlocked the door to the training room, she noticed a figure already waiting outside. It was Jasmine Torres, the scholarship student who had been the first to apologize on that fateful day 6 months ago. "Morning, ma'am," Jasmine said, standing a little straighter. "Hope you don't mind me being early." Olivia smiled, genuinely pleased to see her most dedicated student. "Early is on time is late. And late is unacceptable," Jasmine finished with a grin. It was one of the many Marine Corps sayings that had become common language at Hawthorne since Olivia's arrival. Inside, Jasmine helped Olivia set up for the day's advanced precision class. The young woman had flourished under Olivia's guidance, shedding her initial insecurity and developing into one of the Academy's most promising shooters. "Big day today," Olivia remarked as they arranged the classroom. "First round of qualification tests under the new standards." Jasmine nodded, a flicker of nervousness crossing her face. "Everyone's talking about it. Some of the sponsored shooters are worried their contracts might be at risk if they don't qualify." Olivia had heard the same concerns. Under her guidance, Hawthorne had implemented a new certification system that prioritized actual skill over social media following or expensive equipment. For some members, this represented a genuine threat to their carefully cultivated image as elite marksmen. "Real skill speaks for itself," Olivia said simply. "Today we'll just make that voice a little louder." By 8 o'clock, the facility was humming with activity. Shooters filed into the classroom, some confident, others visibly anxious. Notably absent was Victoria Reeves, who had gradually decreased her appearances at Hawthorne over the past months. as the culture shifted away from her style of performative marksmanship. Olivia stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding attention without her having to ask for it. She wore the same simple outfit she always did, practical pants, a plain polo shirt, and her well-worn boots. No logos, no tactical gimmicks. Nothing but the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. "Today isn't about passing or failing," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "It's about honest assessment, about knowing where you stand so you can improve. In real-world situations, there are no participation trophies. No filters to make your shots look better than they are. There's only the target and whether or not you hit it." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each shooter. "Some of you will do well today, others will struggle. Both outcomes are valuable if you learn from them." The testing began with fundamental marksmanship principles. Not just hitting targets, but understanding the why behind each shot. Shooters rotated through stations that tested their knowledge of ballistics, their ability to adjust for environmental conditions, their skill in maintaining and troubleshooting equipment. By midday, the atmosphere in the facility had shifted from nervous tension to focused determination. Shooters who struggled at certain stations were helping each other, sharing insights, working together instead of competing for social media. Supremacy. This was exactly the culture Olivia had hoped to build. During the lunch break, Director Reynolds joined Olivia in her office. The room was Spartan compared to the luxurious space her predecessor had occupied, just a desk, a few chairs, and a wall displaying various Marine Corps memorabilia. "The transformation is remarkable," Reynolds said, looking out the window at the shooters gathered in small groups, discussing technique rather than posing for photos. "Membership has actually increased despite the higher standards." Olivia nodded. "People want authenticity. They're tired of shortcuts and image over substance." "The board is impressed," Reynolds continued. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about it for a while, actually, even before I met you. But watching you these past months, how you carry yourself, how you approach challenges, how you treat people, it made me more certain." They had reached the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. In the fading light, Jasmine looked older somehow, more resolved. "Whatever you decide," Olivia said, "remember that the uniform doesn't make the Marine. The commitment does. The values do. The willingness to put others before yourself does." Jasmine straightened almost unconsciously, a glimpse of the service member she might become. "Yes, ma'am." As Jasmine walked to her car, Olivia remained for a moment, watching the young woman go. 6 months ago, she had come to Hawthorne Academy as an outsider, mocked and dismissed for her simple appearance and unbranded equipment. Now she stood at the center of a transformation that extended far beyond better shooting techniques. Her phone buzzed with a message from Director Reynolds. "Board meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss making your position permanent. Full creative control over curriculum." Olivia smiled to herself. When she had first accepted this position, she had seen it as temporary, a way to improve standards at one facility before moving on. She hadn't expected to find a new purpose here, a new way to serve. As she drove home that evening, Olivia reflected on the day's events, Victoria's unexpected vulnerability, Jasmine's consideration of military service, the dozens of other shooters who had embraced the new standards, who had chosen substance over style, who had discovered within themselves a capacity for excellence they hadn't known they possessed. Her sister had been right all those months ago. Olivia was changing lives here, not through combat prowess or military authority, but through something more fundamental, the simple, powerful example of authentic expertise, of knowing who you are and standing firm in that knowledge, regardless of how others might judge your appearance or background. The following week brought another surprise. Victoria Reeves posted a video that quickly went viral across shooting and outdoor sports communities. Unlike her previous content, with its perfect lighting and carefully choreographed shots, was raw and unfiltered. Victoria sat in her car, no makeup, no branded apparel, speaking directly to the camera. "I've been doing this all wrong," she began, her voice stripped of its usual polish. "For years, I've been selling you an image of what a competitive shooter looks like, the gear, the sponsors, the perfect Instagram feed. But I recently had a wake-up call that made me realize I've been focusing on all the wrong things." She went on to describe her experience at Hawthorne, though she didn't mention Olivia by name. She talked about failing the qualification test, about the humbling recognition that her social media following didn't translate to real-world skills, about her decision to start over and build genuine expertise. "So I'm taking a break from posting," she concluded. "I'm going back to basics, learning the fundamentals the right way. When I come back, it won't be as an influencer. It'll be as a marksman who actually deserves your attention." The video racked up millions of views within days. The comments section filled with messages of support, with stories from others who had prioritized image over substance in their own pursuits, with questions about the new approach to training at Hawthorne Academy. Director Reynolds called Olivia into his office, practically vibrating with excitement. "The phones haven't stopped ringing. Everyone wants to know about our new certification program. We've got waiting lists for every class." Olivia took the news calmly, though she was pleased. "It's not about the numbers." "No," Reynolds agreed, more serious now. "It's about the integrity of what we're teaching." Speaking of which, I received an interesting call this morning from the FBI Training Division. They want to discuss implementing elements of your curriculum in their marksmanship program. This was unexpected. Olivia had focused on transforming one facility on helping recreational and competitive shooters develop real skills. She hadn't considered the wider applications of her methods. "I told them you'd be in touch," Reynolds continued. "This could be the beginning of something much bigger, Olivia. A complete reimagining of civilian marksmanship training across the country." As Olivia walked back to the range, she passed the wall of photos near the entrance, a display that had once showcased Hawthorne's most photogenic members with their expensive equipment and perfect poses. It had been replaced with a simpler exhibition, shooters of all ages and backgrounds demonstrating proper technique, focused completely on their craft rather than the camera. In the center was a new mission statement, framed in simple black. "Excellence is earned through discipline, not purchased through equipment. True marksmanship begins with humility and ends with consistency. At Hawthorne Academy, we build shooters from the inside out." Olivia stood before these words, reflecting on how far the facility had come in 6 months. From a showcase of privilege and performance to a genuine center for marksmanship excellence. From style over substance to substance-informing style. And perhaps most importantly, from judging people based on their appearance to recognizing that true expertise often comes in the most unassuming packages. As new students filed in for the afternoon class, Olivia noticed that none of them gave a second glance to her simple clothes or unbranded equipment. Instead, they watched her hands as she demonstrated technique, listened intently to her explanations of ballistic principles, followed her instructions with focused determination. They saw her now, not her appearance, not her lack of social media presence, but her expertise, her knowledge, her earned authority. And in that recognition was the most powerful lesson of all, that in a world obsessed with image, the quiet authority of genuine skill will always speak louder than the loudest boast or the flashiest gear. 1 year into her tenure at Hawthorne Academy, Olivia Chambers stood at the edge of the expanded training facility, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on the new tactical simulation building. What had begun as a simple job reforming a single shooting range had evolved into something far more significant, a complete reimagining of civilian marksmanship training, with ripple effects throughout the industry. The morning sun glinted off The windows of the administrative building where Olivia now had a proper office, still Spartan by Hawthorne standards, but functional. On her desk sat a stack of letters from shooting facilities across the country requesting consultation on implementing similar programs. Beside them was an invitation to speak at the National Shooting Sports Conference, an honor typically reserved for Olympic medalists and industry pioneers. A car pulled into the parking lot, a government-issue black SUV that Olivia recognized immediately. She smiled as her sister, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, stepped out in her service uniform, sharply pressed and adorned with the decorations of a distinguished military career. "Quite an empire you're building here," Sarah said as she approached, surveying the expanded facility with professional assessment. "Hard to believe this is the same place where they mocked you for polishing the scope." Olivia shook her head. "Not an empire. Just a place where people can learn properly." Sarah gave her a knowing look. "Always the humble one. Meanwhile, your certification program is being adopted by training centers in 12 states, and I've got generals asking me how my sister revolutionized civilian marksmanship training in under a year." They walked together toward the main building, passing groups of students engaged in various stages of training. Unlike a year ago, the range now hosted a diverse mix of people, competitive shooters alongside law enforcement officers, military veterans alongside civilian enthusiasts, all united by a common commitment to authentic skill development. "How's Jasmine doing?" Sarah asked as they entered the building. The question brought a surge of pride. Jasmine Torres had indeed tried out for the Marine Corps' marksmanship team and had not only made the cut, but distinguished herself as one of their most promising new members. "Thriving," Olivia replied. "Her commanding officer says she's already breaking records in training. Says she came pre-programmed with perfect fundamentals." Sarah nodded, pleased but not surprised. "Your influence. Though I suspect she had the raw talent all along. Just needed someone to see it and nurture it properly." They reached Olivia's office, where Director Reynolds was waiting with a man Olivia didn't recognize, middle-aged, with the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. "Master Sergeant Chambers," Reynolds said, standing as they entered. "Allow me to introduce Deputy Director Michael Harding from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers." Harding extended his hand. "Miss Chambers, your reputation precedes you. I've heard remarkable things about what you've accomplished here." Olivia shook his hand firmly. "Just building on what I learned in the Corps, sir. Nothing revolutionary." "I disagree," Harding said. "What you've done, stripping away the superficial aspects of marksmanship training and focusing on practical skill development, is exactly what we've been trying to implement in our programs for years. With limited success, I might add." He placed a folder on her desk. "Which is why I'm here. We'd like to contract you as a special advisor to redesign the marksmanship qualification standards for federal law enforcement agencies. All of them." The room fell silent as the weight of this offer settled. Sarah gave her sister a look that mixed pride with amusement, a silent, "I told you so." "That's a significant undertaking," Olivia said carefully. "It is," Harding agreed. "And precisely why we need someone with your particular expertise. Someone who understands that real proficiency isn't about checking boxes or passing standardized tests. It's about developing adaptive skills that work under actual stress." Reynolds cleared his throat. "We've discussed how this might work with your current responsibilities here. A partial leave of absence, perhaps, with you splitting time between Hawthorne and the training centers." Olivia's mind was already racing ahead, seeing the possibilities, the challenges, the opportunity to influence training standards that could ultimately save lives. "I'd need complete autonomy over the curriculum design," she said, "and the authority to implement changes even if they're initially unpopular." Harding nodded without hesitation. "Those terms are acceptable. We're not looking for incremental improvements, Miss Chambers. We're looking for transformation. As the meeting concluded and plans were made for Olivia to visit the primary training facility the following month, she found herself reflecting on the strange path that had led her here. From active duty to civilian life, from being mocked as an outsider to becoming a sought-after expert, from polishing a scope in silence to potentially reshaping federal training standards, Sarah lingered after the others had left. "You don't seem as surprised by this as you should be," she observed. "Or as excited." Olivia smiled faintly. "I'm processing. It's a big responsibility." "It's what you're meant to do," Sarah replied simply. "You've always been a teacher at heart, even when you were stacking up combat missions. Remember how you used to train new team members before deployments? How you'd stay late going over fundamentals until they got it perfect? The memories surfaced easily nights on the base range, working with nervous young Marines, building their confidence through repetition and calm guidance. Those had been some of her most rewarding moments in uniform." "I remember," Olivia acknowledged. "This is the same thing," Sarah continued, "just on a larger scale, with potentially greater impact." Before Olivia could respond, there was a knock at the open door. Victoria Reeves stood there, transformed from the image-obsessed influencer of a year ago. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her clothes simple and functional. The only remaining hint of her former self was a single discreet sponsor logo on her shooting bag. "Sorry to interrupt," Victoria said, noticing the colonel. "I can come back." "No need," Sarah replied, standing. "I was just leaving. Gotta get back to Quantico before my aide organizes a search party." She gave Olivia a quick embrace. "Think about what I said, and what Harding offered. This could be your most important mission yet." After Sarah left, Victoria approached Olivia's desk with a tablet in hand. "I wanted to show you something before the board meeting this afternoon." She pulled up a presentation titled Hawthorne Academy, the new standard in civilian training. "It's my proposal for expanding the youth program," Victoria explained, swiping through slides showing detailed plans for scholarship opportunities, community outreach, and partnerships with schools in underserved areas. "Using part of our marketing budget to sponsor students who wouldn't otherwise have access to this kind of training." Olivia scanned the proposal, impressed by its thoroughness and clear sense of purpose. "This is excellent work, Victoria. Really excellent." Victoria beamed at the praise. "I've been thinking about what you said when I first came back, about focusing on what matters. This matters." Over the past year, Victoria's transformation had been perhaps the most surprising development at Hawthorne. After her viral video announcing her retreat from social media, she had dedicated herself to genuine improvement, not just in her shooting skills, but in her understanding of what marksmanship training could offer beyond competitive success or internet fame. She had recently accepted a position as Hawthorne's outreach coordinator, using her media savvy and connections to spread the Academy's new philosophy rather than her own personal brand. "The board will approve it," Olivia said confidently. "The scholarship program aligns perfectly with our new mission." Victoria nodded, but there was something else in her expression, a hesitation, a question unasked. "What is it?" Olivia prompted, echoing the conversation she'd had with Jasmine a year earlier. "I heard about the federal training offer," Victoria said. "Everyone's talking about it. It's an incredible opportunity." "It is," Olivia agreed, waiting for the real question. Victoria took a breath. "If you accept, who will take over the certification program here? There's still so much work to do." There it was. The concern that all they had built together might lose momentum without Olivia's guiding presence. It was a valid worry, one that Olivia herself had been considering since Harding made his offer. "I've been thinking about that," Olivia said, leaning forward. "And I have someone in mind who understands our philosophy completely. Someone who has experienced both sides of this transformation, the old way and the new. Someone who knows firsthand the difference between image and substance." Victoria's eyes widened as she realized what Olivia was suggesting. Me? You'd trust me with that responsibility. Why not? You've earned it. Olivia gestured to the tablet with the scholarship proposal. This shows me you understand what we're really building here. Something that goes beyond shooting scores or certification numbers. Something that changes how people see themselves and their capabilities. Victoria sat down, processing this unexpected vote of confidence. A year ago, I was everything wrong with marksmanship culture. All flash, no substance. Mocking people who didn't have the right gear or the right connections. And now, Olivia prompted. Now I understand what you were trying to show us from the beginning. That true skill doesn't come from equipment or social media followers. It comes from discipline, from humility, from the willingness to fail and learn and try again. She looked up at Olivia, her expression earnest. I'd want to do it right. Honor what you've built here. I know you would, Olivia said simply. That's why I'm suggesting it. Later that afternoon, as the sun began its descent, Olivia found herself back at the edge of the property, watching the construction crews pack up for the day. The tactical simulation building would be completed by month's and another expansion. Another step forward in Hawthorne's evolution from exclusive club to genuine training center. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine, qualified expert today, all because you saw something in me worth developing. Thank you doesn't cover it. Olivia smiled at the message, remembering the uncertain young woman who had approached her. After that first humiliating day, how far she had come. How far they had all come. A voice called her name, and she turned to see Marcus Jensen approaching, one of her first students after taking the technical advisor position, now the head of Hawthorne's law enforcement training program. He had retired from the police force to join Olivia's team, believing in her vision of what marksmanship training could be. Thought I'd find you out here, he said. Contemplating your kingdom? Olivia shook her head, amused by the characterization. Just thinking about the journey. How something positive came from being underestimated and dismissed. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. You know, that's the story most people focus on when they talk about you. The dramatic reveal, the comeuppance for those who mocked you. But that's not really what happened here, is it? What do you mean? I mean, yes, there was a moment of revelation. Yes, those who dismissed you had to confront their own prejudices. But the real story, the one that's still unfolding, isn't about that day. It's about what you built afterward. How you channeled that experience into creating something that benefits everyone, even those who initially mocked you. Olivia considered this. Marcus was right. The viral moment of vindication had been fleeting. The lasting impact came from the patient work that followed, the daily commitment to excellence, the steady insistence on substance over style, the gradual building of a culture that valued genuine skill development. You didn't come here seeking revenge, Marcus continued. You came seeking to share what you know. And because of that, everyone's better off, even Victoria Reeves, who's found more meaning in her work than she ever had as an influencer. This perspective resonated with something Olivia had always believed but rarely articulated, that the best response to being underestimated was not to prove others wrong, but to help everyone improve. Not to shame those who had misjudged you, but to create a space where judgment itself became irrelevant in the face of demonstrated skill. The federal training opportunity, Marcus said, changing subjects. You're taking it, right? Olivia nodded. I think I have to. The potential impact is too significant to pass up. Hawthorne will be in good hands, Marcus assured her. The foundation you've built is solid. The philosophy is embedded now. As they walked back toward the main building, they passed the shooting lanes where it had all begun, where Victoria had mockingly dropped a cleaning rod at Olivia's feet, where others had filmed her humiliation, where she had eventually demonstrated the quiet authority of genuine expertise. The range was busy even at this late hour, filled with students practicing with focused determination. No one was posing for photos. No one was adjusting their gear for maximum brand visibility. They were simply working, learning, improving shot by shot, adjustment by adjustment, failure by instructive failure. Among them was a new group of scholarship students from the local community college, the first beneficiaries of Victoria's program. They had arrived with a mixture of nervousness and excitement, many of them having never held a firearm before. Now they worked under the patient guidance of instructors who judged them not by their backgrounds or equipment, but by their willingness to learn and their commitment to safety and skill. Watching them, Olivia felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This was the real victory, not the moment when her true identity had been revealed, but the lasting change that had followed. The creation of a space where anyone with dedication could develop expertise, regardless of their starting point or external trappings. 3 months later, Olivia stood before a crowded auditorium at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia. Behind her, a simple presentation displayed the core principles of her new marksmanship curriculum, principles that emphasized adaptability over rote procedure, mental discipline over mechanical repetition, and realistic training over artificial benchmarks. In the audience were representatives from every federal law enforcement agency, along with military observers, police trainers, and civilian shooting instructors from across the country. The stakes were high. The potential for resistance was significant. Many of these organizations had been using the same qualification standards for decades, and change would not come easily. Olivia began not with statistics or technical specifications, but with a story, her story. Not the dramatic moment of revelation that had made her briefly famous in shooting circles, but the deeper narrative of how being underestimated had taught her the value of letting performance speak louder than appearance or credentials. The day I walked into Hawthorne Academy in my worn boots and simple clothes, carrying a basic toolkit instead of expensive equipment, I was judged immediately and found wanting, she told the silent auditorium. Not because I lacked skill or knowledge, but because I lacked the external markers that people associated with expertise. She advanced to the next slide, showing before and after photos of Hawthorne, the staged glamour shots of its previous incarnation contrasted with the focused, diverse training environment it had become. That experience reinforced something I had learned through years of military service, that true proficiency has nothing to do with how you look, what gear you carry, or who sponsors your equipment. It has everything to do with fundamentals mastered so thoroughly that they become instinct under pressure. She looked out at the audience, meeting the eyes of skeptical agency directors and tradition-bound training officers. The same principle applies to institutional training. We become so focused on meeting established standards that we forget to question whether those standards actually produce the outcomes we need. We mistake familiar procedures for effective ones. We prioritize consistency over adaptability, tradition over results. For the next hour, Olivia outlined her vision for a complete reimagining of law enforcement marksmanship training, one that incorporated stress inoculation, decision-making under pressure, and scenario-based qualification rather than static target shooting. She presented data from Hawthorne showing dramatic improvements in real-world performance metrics among graduates of her program compared to traditional training methods. When she finished, the questions came pointed, skeptical, challenging. Olivia answered each one with the same calm confidence she had shown that day on the range when Victoria had tried to humiliate her. She didn't defend her ideas with emotion or authority. She simply presented evidence, explained rationales, and invited engagement rather than compliance. By the end of the session, resistance had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something more productive, a thoughtful consideration of how these new approaches might be integrated into existing programs, how they might address long-standing weaknesses in current training methods, how they might ultimately save lives in the field. As the auditorium emptied, Deputy Director Harding approached with a satisfied expression. "You've started something important today," he said. "A conversation that's been needed for a long time." Olivia nodded, though she knew the real work was just beginning. Changing training standards was like turning a massive ship slow, gradual, requiring constant pressure and adjustment. There would be setbacks, resistance, compromises. But the direction was set. The movement had begun. Later that evening, back in her hotel room, Olivia received a video call from Victoria. Behind her, the Hawthorne range was visible, bustling with activity even at this late hour. "How did the presentation go?" Victoria asked eagerly. "About as expected," Olivia replied. "Some interest, some resistance. Seeds planted." Victoria nodded, understanding the long game they were playing. "We're seeing the same thing here with the regional instructors. Some get it immediately. Others need time to adjust their thinking." She shifted the camera to show a group of teaching professionals engaged in Hawthorne's new instructor certification program, a key component of spreading their methodology beyond a single facility. "The first class graduates next week," Victoria continued. 20 certified instructors returning to ranges across 5 states, all teaching the Hawthorne method. "Your method." Olivia felt a surge of satisfaction at this tangible evidence of expansion. What had begun as a personal moment of underestimation had evolved into a movement with the potential to transform an entire industry. "And the youth program?" she asked. Victoria's face lit up. "We've secured funding for 50 full scholarships next year. Students from backgrounds that would never have had access to this kind of training before. Some of them have never even seen a shooting range, except in movies." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "One of them reminds me of myself at that age. All ambition and insecurity masked by attitude. I'm working with her personally." This, perhaps more than anything else, confirmed how far Victoria had come from mocking others to mentoring them, from seeking validation through external markers to finding it through genuine contribution. "You're doing good work," Olivia said simply. "Important work." After the call ended, Olivia stood by the hotel window, looking out at the training center campus spread below. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more presentations, more slow, patient work of changing minds and systems. The day after would be the same, and the day after that. It wasn't glamorous work. It wouldn't generate viral videos or social media fame. It was the quiet, persistent effort of building something valuable, something lasting, not by tearing others down, but by creating opportunities for everyone to rise. She thought about Jasmine, now thriving with the Marine Corps' marksmanship team, about Victoria, transformed from antagonist to ally to leader in her own right, about the countless students who had passed through Hawthorne's doors in the past year, learning not just how to shoot accurately, but how to carry themselves with authentic confidence born of genuine skill. And she thought about that day, standing in her worn boots on Hawthorne's polished floor, absorbing mockery with quiet dignity, knowing even then that true expertise needs no external validation. That real skill speaks for itself, in its own time, in its own way. The most powerful response to being underestimated, Olivia had learned, wasn't proving critics wrong through dramatic confrontation. It was proving them irrelevant through consistent excellence and generous teaching. It was creating spaces where judgment based on appearance or background simply couldn't survive in the face of demonstrated ability. In the end, they hadn't just mocked a woman for polishing scopes. They had unwittingly set in motion a transformation that would benefit even those who had done the mocking. And there was no greater victory than that. 5 years after that fateful day at Hawthorne Academy, Olivia Chambers stood on the stage of the National Marksmanship Conference, preparing to deliver the keynote address to over 2,000 attendees. The audience represented every facet of the shooting world: military and law enforcement trainers, competitive shooters, civilian instructors, equipment manufacturers, and industry leaders from across the country. Behind her, a simple banner displayed the conference theme, Beyond the Target, the Future of Precision Training. No corporate sponsors. No flashy logos. Just a clear statement of purpose for an industry that had undergone remarkable transformation in recent years. As Olivia gazed out at the packed auditorium, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her here. What had begun as a humiliating incident at a single facility had sparked a movement that now influenced training standards nationwide. The Chambers method, as it had come to be known, had been adopted by federal law enforcement agencies, police departments, military units, and civilian training centers across the country. The principles were deceptively simple. Focus on fundamentals. Under stress. Eliminate artificial distinctions between competition shooting and practical application. Judge proficiency by performance rather than procedure. And perhaps most importantly, recognize that true expertise can come from any background, in any package without external markers of status or privilege. The conference director approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker, a woman whose innovative approach to marksmanship training has changed how we think about skill development and certification. Please welcome Master Gunnery Sergeant Olivia Chambers, retired. The applause was thunderous as Olivia stepped to the microphone. She wore the same practical style she always had: simple slacks, a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to her elbows, and boots that, while no longer worn with holes, maintained their unpretentious functionality. No badges of status. No symbols of authority beyond the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she had to offer. "Thank you," she began when the applause subsided. "5 years ago, I walked into a shooting facility carrying a basic tool kit and wearing boots that had seen better days. Within minutes, I was judged, dismissed, and ultimately mocked for polishing the scope of a standard rifle while surrounded by people with custom equipment and branded gear." She paused, letting the story resonate with an audience that had heard versions of it many times. What happened next has become industry legend: how I demonstrated that skill transcends appearance, how my military background was revealed, how those who had judged me were themselves judged. It makes for a satisfying narrative, a moment of vindication that feels good to remember and retell. Olivia looked across the sea of faces, many of whom were nodding in recognition of this well-known story. But that's not why I'm standing here today. I'm here because of what happened after that moment: the quiet, consistent work of building better training methods, of creating more effective certification standards, of expanding access to quality instruction for people who had previously been excluded from our community. She advanced to the first slide of her presentation, showing the nationwide impact of the programs she had helped develop: dramatic improvements in qualification scores, increases in real-world performance metrics, and most importantly, lives saved through better trained professionals making better decisions under pressure. The real story wasn't about me being underestimated. It was about transforming that experience into something that benefited everyone, even those who had done the underestimating. For the next hour, Olivia detailed the evolution of marksmanship training over the past 5 years, highlighting innovations, addressing ongoing challenges, and outlining the work still to be done. She acknowledged the contributions of countless others who had embraced and expanded upon her initial ideas: instructors, administrators, and practitioners who had recognized the value of substance over style in their respective fields. As she concluded her formal remarks, Olivia turned to a topic she rarely discussed publicly: the personal impact of that transformative experience. "Being underestimated is painful," she said, her voice taking on a more intimate quality. "We all want to be seen for who we are, for what we can contribute. When others dismiss us based on superficial judgments, our appearance, our background, our lack of status markers, it triggers a very human response. We want to prove them wrong." We want that moment of vindication." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "But I've learned that vindication is fleeting. The satisfaction of seeing recognition dawn in someone's eyes when they realize they've misjudged you lasts only moments. What endures is what you build afterward, the systems you improve, the people you train, the standards you elevate." Olivia gestured to the audience, where several rows were filled with graduates of Hawthorne's instructor certification program, now leading their own facilities across the country. The greatest response to being underestimated isn't proving critics wrong. It's making their criticism irrelevant through consistent excellence and generous teaching. It's creating spaces where judgment based on appearance simply cannot survive in the face of demonstrated ability. As the presentation concluded and the question and answer session began, a young woman approached the microphone in the center aisle. Olivia recognized her immediately. Jasmine Torres, no longer the uncertain scholarship student, but now a decorated Marine Corps shooting instructor, recently selected for officer candidate school. "Master Sergeant Chambers," Jasmine began, using the military title out of respect despite Olivia's retirement. "Your methods have transformed marksmanship training throughout the armed forces and beyond. But there's one question many of us have wondered about. Why did you never return to active duty when the Corps offered you the chance to lead the modernization of their training programs? Why stay in the civilian sector?" It was a question Olivia had been asked many times over the years, usually in private. Her sister Sarah had posed it repeatedly, particularly as Olivia's influence in training methodology grew beyond Hawthorne to impact federal standards and eventually military approaches as well. "A fair question," Olivia acknowledged. "The simple answer is that I could help more people from where I was. The civilian sector allowed me to influence training across multiple organizations without the constraints of any single system." She considered her next words carefully, aware that her answer would be quoted and analyzed throughout the industry. "But there's a deeper reason. When I was mocked that day at Hawthorne, it wasn't just about me as an individual. It revealed something systemic, a culture that valued appearance over substance, status over skill, image over capability. That same dynamic exists in many institutions, including the military. By working from outside those systems, I could help change them without being limited by their existing structures and assumptions." Jasmine nodded, understanding the strategic choice Olivia had made. "And has it been worth it? The trade-off of direct service for broader influence?" Olivia smiled at the insight behind the question. "Most days, yes. Some days, I miss the clarity of the uniform, the directness of the chain of command. But then I see instructors like you taking these methods back into the service, implementing them from within, and I know the approach is working. Change happens from both directions, outside in and inside out." As the session concluded and attendees filed out for the afternoon breakout sessions, Olivia noticed a familiar face approaching the stage. Victoria Reeves, now the executive director of Hawthorne Academy and the driving force behind its expansion into 5 regional training centers across the country. "Still the same practical boots," Victoria observed with a smile, gesturing to Olivia's footwear. "Some things never change." "Some things shouldn't," Olivia replied, embracing her former antagonist turned ally. "How are the new facilities coming along?" Victoria's expression brightened with pride. "The Midwest Center opens next month. That makes 5 total, all running at capacity with waiting lists for every program. The scholarship initiative has placed over 300 students who would never have had access otherwise." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "And my mentee, the one I told you about years ago who reminded me of myself? She just got accepted to Annapolis, following in your footsteps toward service." This news brought Olivia genuine pleasure. The ripple effects of transformation continued to spread in ways she could never have anticipated. "You've built something remarkable," she told Victoria. Something that will outlast both of us. Victoria shook her head. We built it. I just expanded on the foundation you laid. They walked together toward the conference center atrium, where industry representatives had set up exhibits showcasing the latest in training technology and methodology. Notably absent were the purely cosmetic accessories and status-oriented gear that had once dominated such events. In their place were innovations focused on measurable performance improvement, stress inoculation tools, and adaptive training systems. Remember when this industry was all about who had the most expensive scope or the most elaborate shooting jacket? Victoria mused, surveying the exhibits. Now it's about who can demonstrate the most effective training outcomes. That's your influence. Olivia was about to respond when she noticed a small crowd gathering near the entrance. At the center stood Director Reynolds from Hawthorne, now silver-haired, but still commanding in his presence, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man in a wheelchair, General William Hargrove, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Early, Victoria murmured. The military partnership announcement wasn't scheduled until tomorrow's session. Olivia had been briefed on the initiative, groundbreaking collaboration between Hawthorne's civilian training program and the Department of Defense, aimed at standardizing marksmanship qualification across all service branches using methodologies she had pioneered. It represented the culmination of years of gradual influence and persistent advocacy. Reynolds spotted them and waved them over, his expression conveying the significance of the moment. As they approached, General Hargrove extended his hand to Olivia. "Master Sergeant Chambers," he said with genuine respect. "An honor to finally meet you in person. Your sister speaks very highly of your work." "The honor is mine, sir," Olivia replied, shaking his hand firmly. Hargrove gestured to a nearby seating area. "Do you have a moment? I'd like to discuss something before tomorrow's announcement." As Victoria and Reynolds excused themselves to greet other arriving dignitaries, Olivia sat with the general in a quiet corner of the atrium. Despite his senior position and distinguished career, Hargrove spoke to her as a peer, a fellow professional with valuable expertise to share. "I've studied the implementation of your methods in federal law enforcement and civilian settings," he began. "The results are impressive, dramatic improvements in qualification scores. Yes, but more importantly, better performance under actual stress conditions." Olivia nodded, waiting for him to continue. "What interests me most," Hargrove said, leaning forward slightly, "is the philosophical shift underlying the technical changes. The emphasis on adaptive problem-solving over rote procedure. The focus on mental discipline as the foundation of physical performance. The recognition that expertise can come from unexpected sources." He studied her with thoughtful assessment. "These aren't just training innovations, Master Sergeant. They represent a fundamental rethinking of how we develop and recognize competence in critical skills." "That's accurate, sir," Olivia confirmed. "The technical improvements flow from a change in basic assumptions about what constitutes expertise and how it's developed." Hargrove nodded, satisfied with her response. "Which brings me to the real purpose of this conversation. The partnership we're announcing tomorrow is just the beginning. What we're proposing is a comprehensive review of all combat skills training across the services, using your methodology as the foundation." He held up a hand, anticipating her question. "Not just marksmanship. Everything from close-quarters combat to tactical decision-making to field medicine. A complete reimagining of how we prepare service members for the realities they'll face." The scope of what Hargrove was suggesting took Olivia by surprise. She had expected the partnership to focus specifically on shooting qualifications, not a wholesale transformation of military training philosophy. "That's ambitious, sir." "It's necessary," Hargrove replied without hesitation. "We're preparing for conflicts unlike any we've faced before. Our training methods need to evolve accordingly." He fixed her with a direct gaze. "And we need someone with both the technical expertise and the philosophical vision to lead this effort. Someone who understands from personal experience what it means to be underestimated and overlooked. Someone who has proven that real excellence transcends superficial judgments. Olivia understood immediately what he was proposing. You're offering me a position. Special advisor to the Joint Chiefs on Training Modernization, Hargrove confirmed. With direct authority over implementation across all service branches. No bureaucratic barriers, no institutional resistance. A clear mandate for transformation. It was an extraordinary opportunity, the chance to influence military training at the highest level. To implement on a massive scale the principles she had been refining for 5 years in civilian settings. I'm honored by the offer, sir, Olivia sighed carefully. But I've intentionally remained in the civilian sector for reasons that still seem valid to me. Change often happens more effectively from outside existing systems. Hargrove smiled, clearly having anticipated this response. Normally, I'd agree with you. But sometimes, Master Sergeant, the system is ready for change. Sometimes it's actively seeking it. He leaned forward again, his expression earnest. The methods you've developed represent the future of skills. Training, not just in marksmanship but in all critical competencies. We need those methods implemented now, not gradually adopted over decades. He let that sink in before continuing. You've already proven what can be accomplished from the outside. Imagine what you could do with the full resources and authority of the Department of Defense behind you. As Olivia considered the general's offer, her gaze drifted across the atrium to where Jasmine stood in her Marine Corps uniform, speaking animatedly with a group of young instructors. Beyond her, Victoria was guiding several scholarship students through the exhibits, explaining the evolution of training methodology with the passion of a true convert. Near the entrance, Director Reynolds was deep in conversation with federal training officials who had implemented Olivia's standards in their agencies. Ripples of influence spreading outward from that moment 5 years ago when she had stood silent and composed in the face of mockery, knowing who she was and what she was capable of despite external judgments. I'll need time to consider it, Olivia told Hargrove. And I'd want to ensure that the civilian programs we've built continue to thrive. They reach people who would never have access to military training. Of course, Hargrove agreed readily. In fact, I'd see expanded civilian partnerships as an essential component of the modernization effort. The artificial barriers between military and civilian training have never made sense to me. As they concluded their conversation and rejoined the main conference activities, Olivia found herself at a familiar crossroads, a moment of decision that would shape not just her own future, but potentially the development of training standards for a generation of service members. That evening, a special reception was held for key conference participants and industry leaders. The venue was the rooftop terrace of a downtown hotel, offering sweeping views of the city skyline against the backdrop of a spectacular sunset. Olivia stood slightly apart from the main crowd, watching the interactions with professional interest. The shooting community had changed markedly in 5 years. The ostentatious displays of gear and status that had once dominated such gatherings had given way to more substantive exchanges about training methods and measurable outcomes. People were discussing ideas rather than equipment, principles rather than products. "Penny for your thoughts," said a voice beside her. Olivia turned to find her sister Sarah, now a full bird colonel with responsibility for all Marine Corps marksmanship programs. "Just observing the evolution," Olivia replied, gesturing to the gathering. "Remember when these events were essentially fashion shows with guns?" Sarah laughed. "Hard to forget. Now look at them, actually talking about training effectiveness instead of comparing custom grips and engraved receivers." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two sisters who had chosen different paths within the same field, one working within the system, the other influencing it from outside. "Hargrove offered me a position," Olivia said finally. "Special." advisor on training modernization, direct authority over implementation across all branches. Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. That's unprecedented. Civilians don't usually get that kind of authority over military training programs. That's what makes it interesting, Olivia acknowledged, and challenging. Sarah studied her sister's expression, reading the complexity of emotions behind her composed exterior. You're actually considering it. I am. What happened to change happens more effectively from outside the system? Sarah asked, though there was no challenge in her tone, only genuine curiosity. Olivia gestured toward the conference center visible in the distance. Maybe we've reached the limit of what can be accomplished that way. Maybe it's time to work from within. She turned to face her sister directly. You've been telling me for years that I could do more in uniform. Maybe you were right. Not in uniform, Sarah corrected. As a civilian advisor with unprecedented authority. That's different and potentially more powerful. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Victoria, accompanied by a young woman Olivia didn't recognize, perhaps 20 years old, with a direct gaze and a composed bearing that seemed familiar somehow. Olivia, I'd like you to meet Mia Chun, Victoria said. The mentee I've told you about. She's headed to Annapolis in the fall. Olivia extended her hand, noting the young woman's firm grip and steady eye contact. Congratulations on your appointment. That's a significant achievement. Thank you. Ma'am, Mia replied. I wouldn't be here without the Hawthorne Scholarship Program. Without Director Reeves seeing something in me worth developing. The phrase echoed what Jasmine had said years earlier about Olivia herself. The cycle of recognition and development continued, each person who had been seen and valued passing that gift on to others. Victoria has a good eye for potential, Olivia said. She saw it in me when no one else did. Victoria laughed in surprise. That's a very generous rewriting of history. As I recall, I was the one mocking you for polishing the scope with a cloth from a battered kit. And then you were the first to truly understand what I was trying to build at Hawthorne, Olivia countered. The first to embrace the fundamental philosophy behind the technical changes. She turned back to Mia. That's the real lesson in all of this. Being underestimated can be painful, but it also offers clarity. It shows you who can recognize value beyond surface appearances. Those are the people worth keeping in your life. As the evening progressed and conversations flowed around them, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to the idea Hargrove had proposed. Not for the status or authority it offered, but for the potential impact, the chance to embed these principles at the foundation of military training, influencing how an entire generation of service members would develop critical skills. Near the end of the reception, she found herself again in conversation with Jasmine, who had risen so far from that uncertain scholarship student of 5 years ago. I heard about the Joint Chiefs offer, Jasmine said quietly. News travels fast in these circles. Olivia wasn't surprised. Such a significant potential appointment would naturally generate discussion among military and civilian training professionals. What do you think I should do? She asked, genuinely interested in Jasmine's perspective as someone who had benefited from her civilian training methods and then carried them into military service. Jasmine considered the question carefully before responding. I think you should. Ask yourself where you can do the most good now. Not 5 years ago, not 5 years from now, now. She gestured to the gathering around them. You've already transformed civilian training. Those changes are embedded now, institutionalized in certification standards and instructor development programs. They'll continue even without your direct involvement. Jasmine straightened slightly, unconsciously adopting a more formal posture. But the military, that's a different challenge. Bigger, more complex, more resistant to change. It might need you in a way that the civilian sector no longer does. As the reception wound down and attendees began to depart, Olivia found herself back on the terrace, looking out at the city lights now twinkling against the night sky. Victoria joined her, two women whose paths had started in opposition but had gradually converged toward a common purpose. "You're going to take the position," Victoria said. It wasn't a question. Olivia smiled faintly. "Am I that transparent?" "Only to those who know you well." Victoria leaned against the railing. "Hawthorne will be fine, if that's what you're worried about. The regional centers are thriving. The scholarship program is fully funded for the next decade. The certification standards are established and respected industry-wide." She turned to face Olivia directly. "You built something that will outlast any single person. That's the mark of true leadership." The next morning, as the conference resumed with specialized breakout sessions, Olivia met with General Hargrove to give him her decision. They sat in a small meeting room away from the main activities, the gravity of the moment reflected in the simplicity of their surroundings. "I accept your offer," Olivia said without preamble. "With two conditions." Hargrove nodded, unsurprised. "I'm listening." "First, the civilian partnership programs continue and expand. The artificial separation between military and civilian training ends completely. We develop a unified approach to skills development that benefits both sectors." "Agreed," Hargrove said immediately. "That aligns perfectly with our vision." "And the second condition?" Olivia took a breath, articulating something she had been considering throughout the night. "I want to establish a formal program identifying and developing instructors from unconventional backgrounds. People who might be overlooked in traditional systems, but who have exceptional potential to teach and lead." She thought of Jasmine, of Victoria's mentee Mia, of countless others who had flourished when given opportunities based on their abilities rather than their appearances or backgrounds. "We need to institutionalize the recognition of talent wherever it appears," she continued. "Create pathways for expertise to emerge from unexpected sources. That's how we build resilience and adaptability into the system itself." Hargrove studied her with newfound appreciation. "You're not just talking about training methods. You're talking about changing how we identify and develop talent throughout the organization." "Yes," Olivia confirmed, "because the two are inseparable. How we train reflects who we value and what we believe about human potential." The general extended his hand. "Both conditions accepted, without reservation. Welcome aboard, Special Advisor Chambers." As they shook hands, sealing an agreement that would influence military training for decades to come, Olivia reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her here, from being mocked for polishing a scope to reshaping how an entire generation of service members would develop critical skills. The most powerful response to being underestimated, she had learned, wasn't proving critics wrong through dramatic confrontation. It wasn't even building systems that demonstrated the error of their judgment. It was creating opportunities for everyone to rise above artificial limitations, including those who had once done the underestimating. In the end, they hadn't just mocked a Marine marksman for polishing scopes. They had unwittingly set in motion a transformation that would benefit not just the shooting community, not just law enforcement agencies, not just military training programs, but anyone who had ever been judged by appearances rather than abilities. And there was no greater victory than that. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our everyday inspiration community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload. From us,